Hello, guys and gals, and this is gotta check part 15 of our reading of The Princess Bride by William Goldman. And we're gonna go over the copyright information, which should be on your screen right now. It says it's copyright. That isn't it. Let's find the right page in here. It says copyright 1973 by William Goldman, all rights reserved, published in the United States by Ballantine Books, a division of Random House Incorporated, New York, and simultaneously in Canada by Ballantine Books of Canada, Limited, Toronto, Canada. It has the Library of Congress catalog number, the ISBN, and this is the fourth printing, I guess. Cover by Norman Green. Now, in the last part, Buttercup and Wesley were in the fire swamp, and they had fallen into the snow sand and nearly died. So, anyways, Wesley was able to miraculously save her, but let's see. Okay, we're going to start back a little ways, but anyway. She remained unconscious for a very long time. Wesley busied himself as best he could, cleansing the snow sand from ears and nose and mouth, and most delicate of all, from beneath the lids of her eyes. The length of her quietness disturbed him vaguely. It was almost as if she knew she had died, and was afraid to find out for a fact that it was true. He held her in his arms, rocked her slowly. Eventually she was blinking. For a time, she looked around and around. "We lived then," she managed finally. "We're a hardy breed." "What a wonderful surprise." "No need," he said he was going to say, "no need for worry," but her panic struck too quickly. It was a normal enough reaction, and he did not try to block it, but rather held her firmly and let the hysteria run its course. She shuddered for a time, as if she fully intended to fly apart, but that was the worst. From there, it was but a few minutes of quiet sobbing, then she was Buttercup again. Wesley stood buckled on his sword, replacing his long knife. "Come," he said, we have far to go." "Not until you tell me," she replied. Why must we endure this?" "Now is not the time." Wesley held out his hand. "It is the time." She stayed where she was, on the ground. Wesley sighed. She meant it. "All right," he said, finally. "I'll explain, but we must keep moving." Buttercup waited. "We must get through the fire swamp," Wesley began, for one good simple reason. Once he had started talking, Buttercup stood, following closely behind him as he went on. "I've always intended getting to the far side. I had not, I must admit, expected to go through. Around was my intention, but the ravine forced me to change." "The good and simple reason?" Buttercup prompted. "On the far end of the fire swamp is the mouth of Giant Eel Bay, and anchored far out in the deepest waters of that bay is the great ship Revenge. The Revenge is the sole property of the dread pirate Roberts." "The man who killed you," Buttercup said. "That man? The one who broke my heart? The dread pirate Roberts took your life. That was the story I was told." "Quite correct," Wesley said. "And that ship is our destination." "You know the dread pirate Roberts?" "You are friendly with such a man?" "It's a little more than that," Wesley said. "I don't expect you to quite grasp this all at once. Just believe it's true. You see, I am the dread pirate Roberts." "I fail to see how that is possible, since he had been marauding for 20 years, and you only left me 3 years ago." I myself am often surprised at life's little quirks," Wesley admitted. "Did he in fact capture you when you were sailing for the Carolinas?" "He did. His ship Revenge captured the ship I was on, the Queen's Pride, and we were all to be put to death." "But Roberts did not kill you?" "Clearly." "Why?" "I cannot say for sure, but I think it's because I asked him please not to." The please, I suspected, aroused his interest. "I did not beg or offer bribery, as the others were doing. At any rate, he held off with his sword long enough to ask, why should I make an exception an exception of you. And I explained my mission, how I had to get to America to get money to reunite me with the most beautiful woman ever reared by man, namely you. I doubt that she is as beautiful as you imagine, he said, and he raised his sword again. Hair the color of autumn, I said, and skin like wintry cream. Wintry cream, eh? He said. He was interested now, at least a bit, so I went on describing the rest of you, and at the end I knew I had him convinced of the truth of my affection for you. I'll tell you, Wesley, he said then. I feel genuinely sorry about this, but if I make an exception in your case, news will get out that the dread pirate Roberts has gone soft, and that will mark the beginning of my downfall. For once they stop fearing you, piracy becomes nothing but work, 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 all the time, and I am far too old for such a life. I swear I will never tell, nor ever, no, nor even my beloved, I said, and if you will let me live, I will be your personal valet and slave for 5 full years, and if I ever once complain or cause you anger, you may chop my head off then and there, and I will die with praise for your fairness on my lips. I knew I had him thinking. Go below, he said. I'll most likely kill you tomorrow. Wesley stopped talking for a moment and pretended to clear his throat because he had spotted the first rouse, Rous, following behind them. There seemed no need yet to alert her, so he just continued to clear his throat and hurry along between the flame bursts. What happened tomorrow? Buttercup urged. Go on. Well, you know what an industrious fellow I am. You remember how I like to learn and how I'd already trained myself to work 20 hours a day. I decided to learn what I could about piracy in the time left allotted me, since it would at least keep my mind off my coming slaughter. So I helped the cook and I cleaned the hold and in general did whatever was asked of me, hoping that my energies might be favorably noted by the dread pirate, Roberts himself. Well, I've come to kill you, he said the next morning, and I said thank you for the extra time. It's been most fascinating. I've learned such a great deal. And he said, overnight? What could you learn in that time? And I said that no one had ever explained to your cook the difference between table salt and cayenne pepper. Things have been a bit fiery this trip, he admitted. Go on, what else? And I explained that there had been more room in the hold if boxes had been stacked differently. And then he noticed that I had completely reorganized things down there, and fortunately for me, there was more room. And finally he said, very well, you can be my valet for a day. I've never had a valet before. Probably I won't like it, so I'll kill you in the morning. Every night for the next year, he always said something like that to me. Thank you for everything, Wesley. Good night. Now I'll probably kill you in the morning. By the end of the year, of course, we were more than valet and master. He was a pudgy little man, not all that fierce, as you would expect the dread pirate Roberts to be, and I like to think he was as fond of me as I of him. But then I had learned really quite a great deal about sailing and hand fighting and fencing and throwing the long knife, and had even been in an excellent physical and had never been in as excellent physical condition. At the end of 1 year, my captain said to me, enough of this valet business, Wesley. From now on, you are my second in command. And I said, thank you, sir, but I could never be a pirate. And he said, you want to get back to the autumn-haired creature of yours, don't you? And I didn't even have to bother answering that. A good year or two of piracy, and you'll be rich, and back you go. And I said, your men have been with you for years, and they aren't rich. And he said, that's because they are not the captain. And I'm going to retire soon, Wesley, and the revenge will be yours. I must admit, beloved, I weakened a bit there, but we reached no final decision. Instead, he agreed to let me assist him in the next few captures and see how I liked it. which I did. There was now another Rouse following them, flanking them as they moved. Buttercup saw them now. Wesley, shh, it's all right. I'm watching them. Shall I finish? Will it take your mind off them? You helped him with the next few captures, Buttercup said, to see if you liked it. Wesley dodged a sudden burst of flame, shielded Buttercup from the heat. Not only did I like it, but it turned out I was talented as well, so talented that Roberts said to me one April morning, Wesley, the next ship is yours. Let's see how you do. That afternoon, we spotted a fat Spanish beauty loaded for Madrid. I sailed up close. They were in a panic. Who is it? The captain cried. Wesley? I told him. Wesley, I told him. Never heard of you, he answered, and with that they opened fire. Disaster. They had no fear of me at all. I was so flustered, I did everything wrong, and soon they got away. I was, do I have to add, disheartened. Roberts called me into his cabin. I slunk in like a whipped boy. Buck up, he told me, and then he closed the door, and we were quite alone. What I'm about to tell you, I have never said before, and you must guard it closely. I, of course, said I would. I am not the Dread Pirate Roberts, he said. My name is Ryan. I inherited this ship from the previous Dread Pirate Roberts, just as you will inherit it from me. The man I inherited from was not the real Dread Pirate Roberts either. His name was Cumberbund. The real original Dread Pirate Roberts has been retired 15 years and has been living like a king in Patagonia. I confessed my confusion. It's really very simple, Ryan explained. After several years, the original Roberts was so rich he wanted to retire. Clooney was his friend and first mate, so he gave the ship to Clooney, who had an identical experience to yours. The first ship he attempted to board nearly blew him out of the water, so Roberts realized the name was the thing that inspired the necessary fear. Sailed the Revenge to port, changed crew entirely, and Clooney told everyone he was the Dread Pirate Roberts, and who was to know he was not. When Clooney retired rich, he passed the name to Cumberbund to me, and I, Felix Raymond Ryan of Bootle, outside Liverpool, now dub thee, Wesley, the Dread Pirate Roberts. All we need to do is land, take on some new young pirates. I will sail along for a few days as Ryan, your first mate, and we will tell everyone about my years with you, the Dread Pirate Roberts. Then you will let me off when they are all believers, and the waters of the world are yours. Wesley smiled at Buttercup. So now you know, and you should also realize why it is foolish to be afraid. But I am afraid. It will all be happy at the end. Consider, a little over 3 years ago, you were a milkmaid and I was a farm boy. Now you are almost a queen and I rule uncontested on the water. Surely such individuals were never intended to die in a fire swamp. How can you be sure? Well, because we're together, hand in hand, in love. Oh yes, Buttercup said. I keep forgetting that. Both her words and her tone were a trifle standoffish, something Wesley surely would have noticed had not a Rouse attacked him from a tree branch, sinking its giant teeth into his unprotected shoulder, forcing him to earth in a very unexpected spurt of blood. The other two that had been following launched their attack. Then two, ignoring Buttercup, dove forward with all their hungry strength to Wesley's bleeding shoulder. Any discussion of the Rouse, R-O-U-S, rodents of unusual size, must begin with the South American capybara, which has been known to reach a weight of 150 pounds. They are nothing but water hogs, however, and present very little danger. The largest pure rat is probably the Tasmanian, which has actually been weighed at 100 pounds, but they have little agility, tending to sloth when they reach full growth, and most Tasmanian herdsmen have learned with ease to avoid them. The fire swamp rouses were pure rat strain, weighing usually 80 pounds, and had the speed of wolfhounds. They were also carnivorous and capable of frenzy. The rats struggled with each other to reach Wesley's wound. Their enormous front teeth tore at the unprotected flesh of his left shoulder, and he had no idea if Buttercup was already half devoured. He only knew that if he did not do something desperate right then and right there, she soon would be. So he intentionally rolled his body into a spurt of flames. His clothes began to burn, and he expected, but more importantly, the rats shied away from the heat and the flame, and for just an instant. But that was enough for him to reach and throw his long knife into the heart of the nearest beast. The other two turned instantly on their own kind and began eating it while it was still screaming. Wesley had his sword by then, and with two quick thrusts, the trio of rats was disposed of. "Hurry," he shouted to Buttercup, who stood frozen where she had been when the first rat landed. "Bandages, bandages," Wesley cried. "Make me some bandages or we die." And with that, he rolled on the ground, tore off his burning clothes, and set to work caking mud into the deep wound in his shoulder. They are like sharks, blood creatures. It's blood they thrive on. He smeared more and more mud onto his wound. "We must stop my bleeding, and we must cover the wound so they do not smell it. If they don't smell the blood, we'll survive. If they do, we're for it. So help me, please." Buttercup ripped her clothes into patches and ties, and they worked at the wound, caking the blood with mud from the floor of the fire swamp, then bandaging and rebandaging it over and over. "We'll know soon enough," Wesley said, because two more rats were watching them. Wesley stood sword in hand. "If they charge, they smell it," he whispered. The giant rats stood watching. "Come," Wesley whispered. Two more giant rats joined the first pair. Without warning, Wesley's sword flashed, and the nearest rat was bleeding. The other three contented themselves with that for a while. Wesley took Buttercup's hand, and again they started to move. "How bad are you?" she said. "I am in something close to agony, but we can talk about that later. Hurry now." They hurried. They had been in the fire swamp for 1 hour, and it turned out to be the easiest one they had been of the 6 it took to cross it, but they crossed it, alive and together, very much in hand. It was nearly dusk when they at last saw the great ship Revenge far out to the deepest part of the bay. Wesley, still within the confines of the fire swamp, sank, beaten, to his knees. From between him and the ship were more than a few inconveniences. From the north sailed in half the great armada. From the south now the other half, 100 mounted horsemen, armored and armed. In front of them the count, and out alone in front of all, the 4 whites, with the prince astride the leader. Wesley stood. We took too long in crossing. The fault is mine." "I accept your surrender," the prince said. Wesley held Buttercup's hand. "No one is surrendering," he said. "You're acting silly now," the prince replied. "I credit you with bravery. Don't make yourself a fool." What is so foolish about winning?" Wesley wanted to know. "It's my opinion that in order to capture us, you will have to come into the fire swamp. We have spent many hours here now. We know where the snow sand waits. I doubt that you or your men will be any too anxious to follow us in here, and by morning we will have slipped away." "I doubt that somehow," said the prince, and he gestured out to sea. Half the armada had begun to give chase to the great ship Revenge, and the Revenge alone was sailing as it had to do away. "Surrender," the prince said. "It will not happen." "Surrender," the prince shouted. "Death first," Wesley roared. "Will you promise not to hurt him?" Buttercup whispered. What was that? The prince said. What was that? Wesley said. Buttercup took a step forward and said, if you surrender freely and without struggle, if life returns to what it was 1 desk ago, will you swear not to hurt this man? Prince Humperdinck raised his right hand. I swear on the grave of my soon-to-be dead father, and the soul of my already dead mother, that I shall not hurt this man, and if I do, may I never hunt again, though I live 1,000 years. Buttercup turned to Wesley. There, she said, you can't ask for more than that, and that is the truth. The truth, said Wesley, is that you would rather live with your prince than die with your love. I would rather live than die, I admit it. We were talking of love, madam. There was a long pause, then Buttercup said it. I can live without love. And with that, she left Wesley alone. Prince Humperdinck watched her as she began the long cross to him. When we are out of sight, he said to Count Rugen, take that man in black and put him in the 5th level of the Zoo of Death. The Count nodded. For a moment, I believed you when you swore. I spoke the truth. I never lie, the prince replied. I said I would not hurt him, but I never for a moment said I would not suffer pain. That he would not suffer pain. You will do the actual tormenting. I will only spectate. He opened his arms, then for his princess. He belongs to the ship Revenge, Buttercup said. He is, she began about to tell Wesley's story, but that was not for her to repeat. A simple sailor, and I have known him since I was a child. Will you arrange that? Must I swear again? No need, Buttercup said, because she knew, as did everyone, that the prince was more forthright than any Florinese. Come along, my princess. He took her hand. Buttercup went away with him. Wesley watched it all. He stood silently at the edge of the fire swamp. It was darker now, but the flame of the fire swamp but the flame spurts behind him outlined his face. He was glazed with fatigue. He had been bitten, cut, gone without rest, had assaulted the cliffs of insanity, had saved and taken lives. He had risked his world, and now it was walking away from him, hand in hand with a ruffian prince. Then Buttercup was gone out of sight. Wesley took a breath. He was aware of the score of soldiers starting to surround him, and probably he could have made a few of them perspire for their victory. But what was the point? Wesley sang. Come, sir, Count Rugen approached. We must get you to safety of your ship. We are both men of action, Wesley replied. Lies do not become us. Well spoken, said the Count, and with one sudden swing he clubbed Wesley into insensitivity. Wesley fell like a beaten stone, his last conscious thought being of the Count's right hand. It was 6-fingered, and Wesley could never quite remember having encountered that deformity before. Chapter 6, The Festivities. Okay, check here. Okay, we still have time. This is one of those chapters again where Professor Bongiorno of Columbia, the Florinese guru, claimed that Mortenson's satiric genius is at its fullest flower. That's the way the guy talks. Fullest flower. Delicious drolleries. And so on. And on and on. This festival's chapter is mostly detailed descriptions of, guess what? Bingo, the festivities. It's like 89 days till the nuptials, and every high muckamuck in Florin has to give a due for the couple, and what Morgenstein fills his pages with is how the various richies of the time entertained, what kind of parties, what kind of food, who did the decoration, how did the seating arrangement get settled, all that kind of thing. The only interesting part but it's not worth going through 44 pages for, is that Prince Humperdinck gets more and more interested and mannerly towards Buttercup, cutting down even a little on his hunting activities, and more important, because of the foiling of the kidnapping attempt, three things happen. One, everyone is pretty well convinced that the plot was engineered by Gilder, so relations between the countries are more than a little strained. Two, Buttercup is just adored by everybody because the rumors are all over that she acted very bravely and even came through the fire swamp alive. And three, Prince Humperdinck is at last in his own land a hero. He was never popular, what with his hunting fetish and leaving the country to kind of rot once his old man got senile. But the way he foiled the kidnapping made everyone realize that this was some brave fella, and they were lucky to have him next in line to lead them. Let's see. Anyhow, these 44 pages cover just about the first month of party going, and it's not till the end of that for my money things get going again. Buttercup is in bed, pooped. It's late the end of another long party, and as she waits for sleep, she wonders what sea Wesley is riding on, and the giant and the Spaniard. Whatever happened to them? So eventually, in three quick flashbacks, Morgenstern returns to what I think is the story. When Inigo regained consciousness, it was still night on the cliffs of insanity. Far below, the waters of Florin Channel pounded. Inigo stirred, blinked, tried to rub his eyes, couldn't. His arms were tied together around a tree. Inigo blinked again, banishing cobwebs. He had gone on his knees to the man in black, ready for death. Clearly, the victor had another notion. Inigo looked around as best he could, and there it was, the six-fingered sword, glittering in the moonlight like lost magic. Inigo stretched his right leg as far as it would go and managed to touch the handle. Then it was simply a matter of inching the weapon close enough to be grasped by one hand, and then it was an even simpler task to slash his bindings. He was dizzy when he stood, and he rubbed his head behind his ear where the man in black had struck him. A lump sizable, to be sure, but not a major problem. The major problem was what to do now. Vizzini had strict instructions for occasions such as this. When a plan went wrong, go back to the beginning. But to the beginning was to wait for Vizzini, then regroup, replan, start again. Inigo had even made a little rhyme out of it for physique, so the giant would not have a problem remembering what to do in time of trouble. Fool, fool, back to the beginning is the rule. Inigo knew precisely where the beginning was. They had gotten the job in Florin City itself, the thieves' quarters. Vizzini had made the arrangement alone, as he always did. He had met with their employer, had accepted the job, had planned it all in the thieves' quarter. So the thieves' quarter was clearly the place to go. We are going to stop that here. We've been reading from The Princess Bride, a hot fairy tale by William Goldman. If you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to support me in any way, all the information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.